Brilliant. Well, I think we'll get started now. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome Ashleigh from Halo Business Consulting to our ongoing series about personalising the guest journey. Welcome, Ashleigh.
Thank you very much, James. It's a pleasure to be here, and we've known each other for a little while now, and delighted to be part of this series. And I've really enjoyed your previous episode, so delighted to be a guest. Thank you.
Brilliant. And today we are going to have a chat about pre-opening and how to get that right, which I think is such a vitally important part of getting a new hotel open, but also making sure positioning and all the other bits and pieces. Ashleigh's going to take us through that, so we'll have a deck and to run through. So I'm really excited to talk about that. I think pre-opening, you know, when you get your brand site live and you start to get some bookings through the door, it's a really exciting time, but there is so much decision making and process and thinking that needs to happen before that moment begins. Ovlos can be part of that, obviously. That's just, you know, have to do the selling and promote. But yeah, Ashleigh's going to take us through that. So I don't know, Ashleigh, do you want to introduce what you do and some of your recent projects or anything else you'd like to say before we have a look at a deck?
Yes, great. Well, thank you so much for having me and for being here. So I'm the co-founder of Halo Business Consulting, and we are a marketing and guest experience consultancy for the hospitality sector. So I co-founded it with my husband, who is also a hotelier. We come from slightly different backgrounds and skill sets. So I'm much more on the marketing, PR, comms front, and my husband, Michael, is more from operations and guest experience. But we really felt, particularly now with the acceleration of digital experiences in the sector, actually the two skill sets really kind of intertwine, and hence the name Halo, the power of the first impression and the halo effect that goes beyond that. So we've been operating for about 5 years, and we work with clients here in the UK as well as globally, from global brands such as IHG to independent small boutique hotels, working directly with the owners and everything else in between. I would say that we have found, I suppose, our niche in supporting hotels through their launch, pre-opening, launch and beyond. It can be quite an intense time, and I think being able to sort of parachute in and become an extension of their team can really support and just ensure that we meet those critical milestones. So prior to Halo, I worked within the industry itself. So I was a director of marketing for Shangri-La, launched the Shangri-La at the Shard, which was an incredible project a number of years ago. I worked with Starwood prior to Marriott merger, Hilton Hotels, as well as working at some of London's best PR agencies as well. So I feel like I've had a foot in both in-house as well as agency side, which has really helped us, I think, to shape what we offer in terms of offering that really kind of flexible support for hotels. So we can support hotels with everything from fractional leadership in marketing, operations, guest experience, to specific projects, whether that's a launch, whether it's to help increase their CRM optimization. Yeah, we've worked with hotels. We've probably got up to about 10 clients on various different projects. So yeah, we're really grateful to work with such wonderful people, and obviously with collaborations such as yourselves, James.
Oh, thank you, Ashleigh. I do have to ask a little bit about the Shangri-La at the Shard, because yes, I remember when that hotel opened. And if you haven't been, please go and see the hotel. It just is stunning, and the views. You get this fantastic view of London Bridge and also of Waterloo. But I was always fascinated by that hotel because it's obviously super luxury. You know, Shangri-La product is second to none. But in terms of location, it really was the first proper super luxury hotel on the south of the river.
It absolutely was. So yeah, I mean, there was a huge amount of placemaking that we needed to do to really sell the area. And I think that the destination now has completely transformed, and all of the work that's happened at London Bridge as a kind of transport hub. But I think what was great was there was such amazing kind of anchor tenants along that south bank. So like Borough Market, for example, the Tate Modern, and then lots of kind of quirkier, sort of more artisanal businesses that we were able to really kind of collaborate and support each other to make kind of SE1 a destination. So that was certainly a huge education exercise which we needed to do. Also, it was only the third opening in Europe for the Shangri-La brand. So whilst it was better known in Asia, obviously where it's rooted, and the States, it was still relatively new to Europe. So there was quite a lot of kind of brand awareness that we needed to do, and really look at bringing that brand, but I suppose having some adaptations for the London market. So we couldn't, just necessarily export exactly what they'd done in their Istanbul property, which I think was what the one that had opened just before the London hotel. So it was, incredible project, as you say, beautiful location, stunning views, and I think it will always stay with me as an example of a really iconic hotel opening in London.
Yeah, just as it was at the time and still is for me is iconic. But again, I think you touched on some really interesting bits about destination there. So, and how important that was. And that's, again, is what Ovla is all about. But I'm going to pop your, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to pop your deck up on stage. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're going to talk about, and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, so I think when we first had the conversation around talking about personalization, I suppose I wanted again to speak around that lens of a hotel opening, and I think that is an area where I'm so passionate about, and I've had the opportunity, fortunately, to work on a number of different hotel openings, from big brands right through to smaller independents. So I wanted to, it's such a broad topic, obviously, and I wanted to try and really distill it down into some core themes. And it was, just at the weekend, actually, while I was baking with my youngest, I thought, we just need to keep it simple, the ABCs of a hotel opening. So that was where that idea sprung from. So here we are, broken down into audience, brand, and communication. So if
there you go, that's your ABC.
There you go. You heard it here first. I'm also a bit of a Jackson 5 fan, so that worked quite well. So I think when we talk about personalization, I think the immediate thought can often turn to the last point here, which is communication, because I think we in the hospitality sector, it's a people business, right? So we are natural communicators. We want to, communicate with our guests, communicate with our teams. But I think particularly for a new opening, you need to just really kind of come back to the very beginning, and that is understanding who your audience is, who are you targeting, and that really then helps to shape your brand and creating that memorable and distinct brand identity and communication touch points. And then the communication is how you then go out and speak on a very personal level to these targeted guests, really showcasing your brand values. So that for me is kind of what encapsulates that journey that in my mind that you need to go on to really personalize your guest experience for your hotel. So let's dive into understanding your audience. And I think this is where there is a huge amount of data that we can really tap into to do that kind of in-market analysis. So that's looking at maybe who is your closest competitors, looking at who you anticipate your guests to be because of where you are located, what you're thinking about offering, and looking at those demographic and psychographic insights. So I think to your point, the AI work that you do at Ovla, I think you can really sort of extract and start to tap into some of those insights which can help to make this decision making, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think getting the data from different parts of the guest journey. So is it in the inspire? We'll look at this a little bit later, I think, in your deck, but is it in which stage is it in that you collect that data, and then how do you shape your offering to sort of match at the different stages of the guest journey? And I think, the reason for travel, if we're lucky enough to get a booking from brand.com, you might get the reason for travel because it's come through your booking engine. But if you're getting a guest through booking.com or Expedia, you have very little data to go on, so it's very much harder to do that. And so getting good data in that first phase, certainly when you're starting to take bookings, is really important, but also
really,
inspiring. Sorry, carry on, please.
No, and just coming back to your point about sort of reason for travel and your, I suppose, persona while traveling. There's some really interesting trends now. Apart from it being January, and I'm pleased that it's almost February, I love this time of year because it's when all of the travel trends and kind of predictions come out for the year ahead. So there's always some amazing kind of studies and acronyms and words that come out. So there's a lot of, I suppose, trends that kind of continue. So like the pleasure travel, and there's like 1 in 3 trips now are some combination of work and leisure. So, how we as hoteliers, cater our flexible spaces for that, our bedrooms to allow for that work, but also that downtime as well. There's the whole piece around technology, and whilst we want to have technology to make our lives easier, there's also a mindfulness around disconnecting and actually having time in the moment with your family, with your colleagues. So again, making provisions that we provide a seamless experience from a tech perspective, but guests can also switch off as well, and we curate experiences, whether that's through yoga, mindfulness, or certain amenities in the room that allow our guests to sleep, to switch off. So Hilton did a really great study that they've just announced, and they call it sleep tourism, with I think 3 Z's, and it's all about sleep tourism.
Managed to shoehorn that in there.
Exactly. And it's really just, they've done a whole piece around guests who actually are wanting to have separate beds, for example, because one might prefer a different duvet tog, or whatever that is, but actually the whole premise is to allow people to switch off and rest easier. And again, that ties back into the amenity offerings, and again, understanding what it is that specific guest requires on that specific stay. So that guest could be with you as a business guest, but then flips and his family arrives, her family arrives, and all of a sudden you've got a totally different offering to then flex to. So I think it's about being really specific and I suppose quite granular in terms of the data that we have available. And to your point, absolutely, when you have your guest booking on brand.com, there's a much more rich data that can come in, and you can have a much more kind of holistic view of your guest, and also use that data in a way that can help to shape and create your target personas, which I would say not to have too many. I would say potentially around kind of 6 is probably a good number, in understanding who your key audiences are, why they visit, what their needs are, and overlaying that with data that you can kind of manipulate and use yourself, but also that wider kind of comp set data is always a good benchmark as well. So I'd say that is the first point, and just being really hot on understanding what guests are looking for and those trends, and sometimes they can be a bit gimmicky, but I think it's good to just be very mindful about what things are shaping the industry and what people are looking for. So I think moving on to brand. So your brand, whether you are an independent hotel of 50 rooms, for example, or you're a big global chain of the big brands that are out there, the Marriotts of the world and Hiltons, etc., that you are creating an anticipation and an expectation in your guests' minds before they walk through the doors. I think it's, first of all, when you're opening a hotel, there's a decision to be made. Are you an independent brand, and you have maybe more flexibility around what your amenities look like, what different touch points you have, design, photography, visual assets. You can be very flexible. Or do you go with a really established brand that you know has recognition globally or in your marketplace that can help you with that distribution to their loyalty program members, to the infrastructure across all of their different channels, so you can really leverage the power of that brand for your property? Or which is becoming, I would say, well, certainly in our experience, that kind of hybrid, that soft brand, which we see with, for example, Marriott's Autograph Collection or Hilton's Curio brand, where you have a hotel which essentially is independent in its look and feel, its name, but it's part of a collection that then has access to Envoy loyalty program, or it can sit within their ecosystem of branded sites. So I think in many ways that's kind of almost like a happy place for a lot of hotel owners, that they have the benefits of a global brand and the backing and the loyalty program, but then they have the individuality to then still have their own brand and put their own stamp on it. But I think that is kind of quite a key decision, obviously, that needs to be made in the relatively early stages of that brand selection process.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, do you prefer to work with a global chain and one of these sort of softer brands or collection hotels with Marriott, or do you prefer to do a completely independent brand for this sort of process?
Oh, that's it.
Difficult question, perhaps.
That's it. So my career started with Starwood, which is now part of Marriott, and then I'd always worked with kind of bigger global chains, and I think that was a great learning ground in terms of really understanding the layers of digital marketing and PR, and having huge agencies and expertise and structures to get your hotel launched. So I think I often still refer back to those brand guidelines and those kind of structures to inform how we would apply that to an independent. I think, yes, of course, as a marketeer through and through, the ability to create a brand completely from scratch and to have that flexibility to create something completely new is very appealing. But I do think, from a pragmatic perspective, having the support and the distribution of those bigger brands can be really important. So for me, it is powerful, and so that's why I'm really enjoying sort of a number of projects that we've worked on recently have been in that kind of softer brand space, where we still have all of the I suppose kind of creativity around brand touch points, different partnerships and collaborations that we can work on, yet we've got a kind of supportive machine in the background that's helping us to get that message out globally. And I think particularly for a destination like London, it's so international. And some hotel brands we work with, their audience will be much more of an international audience than it is a domestic audience. And I think sometimes that's where brands you can leverage their sort of awareness and distribution.
No, that's brilliant. So just last point on this one, and then we'll move to the next slide. You have a really interesting point at the end, is how does personalization reinforce brand loyalty and repeat booking? So this, for us, I think is really important. There's a Google study out there which is worth digging up, which says 57% of travelers will rebook if you provide a personalized, tailored experience to them, which I think is so key. And there's been some interesting bits floating around recently. We have all this guest data, we have all these different bits and pieces. And for someone who stayed in a hotel 9 times to go to the front desk and say, "Oh, hi, I'm back," and the person says, "Oh, is this your first time staying?" You kind of lose a little bit of that personalization. Obviously is completely out the window. But I think if someone recognizes you at a reception desk and says, "Welcome back, I think you've stayed, this is your 9th stay and we're so glad to have you," I mean, instantly puts a smile on the face, but also means that you will go back. And I think that's a lot of what Ovlo's, to get the sales Ovlo bit. And again, but that's again what Ovlo is about, is can we recommend the good stuff? Going back to the Shangri-La and the Shard, there's so much in London Bridge now. there's Padella, the famous pasta place, there's Borough Market, all these other bits and pieces. Can we recommend these things and put our hotel at the center of these things? But anyway, sorry, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just absolutely. And to close that point off, I think, sometimes it's just as simple as, the profile hasn't merged in the property management system because there's two data points that haven't quite connected. And to your point, it's a really small back end glitch, but actually could really lose the trust of that guest, and just devalue the whole experience and that whole concept of trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets, I think kind of really rings true in that sort of regard.
I haven't heard that before. That's a great one. That's a great one. Just say that again. I think that's a good one for the audience.
Trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets.
Yes, very good. No, I think I had heard that before, but it's good to hear it. Great to hear it again. Now, this is I think my favorite slide from your presentation. Would you just talk through a little bit about how you come up with this, because I think there are so many touch points and so many different parts of the guest journey that can be affected and can be sort of leveraged by hotels. So talk us through this one.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of moving through to, obviously, as you kind of get closer either to your launch, or you might be operational and taking bookings and looking at your whole guest journey as a real circular exercise, because ultimately you want to generate those repeat bookings and really build that loyalty. So the first phase, whether that's in your pre-opening or you've opened and you're taking bookings, is obviously that inspiration and providing that impetus to book. And there was a study done that suggested there was over 25 touch points that a guest would go through before they actually went ahead and made a booking. So that might be checking out your social media page, going on to TripAdvisor, looking at booking.com and your reviews, finding some user-generated content from previous guests. So there's so many distractions along the way. So again, coming back to your brand and your persona and your USPs, if you can provide that consistent experience in that really, really early phase of that first impression with the guest, that's going to move them through to that booking phase a lot quicker and a lot more confidently. And I think this is where, throughout this process of the guest coming to decide that they stay from them then checking out, there's so much opportunity to leverage data based on their search history, based on whether they've come back to the site. So you're kind of kicking in some retargeting ads, and really, I think defining what data would be most helpful at each point and using that to personalize the experience, I think is key. So we've got the inspiration phase. We've then got the guest has decided to make that booking. Okay, great. So then what is that point of contact? Usually a confirmation email. How is that personalized based on, maybe the number of guests? Are they traveling with children? Are they coming at a particular time that there's something really, that you want to showcase at the hotel or in the local area? So that begins that dialogue. And I think for a lot of hotels, they will have some form of email marketing or CRM, but then I think now a lot of brands are moving towards apps that we already have, whether it's kind of WhatsApp or other apps that start to get notifications, which I think can be really helpful if they're done well. They can be quite annoying if they're not.
So I'm going to stop you there and just ask about pre-arrival comms, because we've seen, so again, when I stay in hotels and I receive a pre-arrival email, some of these are great and some of them are an absolute disaster with like 100. I think I was talking to someone from one of the other providers who has seen a pre-opening email with 45 links in it to other things.
Wow.
Which I think is difficult. But I think it's really, that's just the selling. So we've launched our Muse integration really shortly, which will have personalized stuff sent to a guest before they arrive as pre-arrival based on their guest profile, which we're really excited about, because it is that, inspire. We can get it into a brand site and show you, put your hotel at the center of the destination. You can get it into pre-arrival based on personalization so that it's relevant to you, to your guest. And then I guess you're in stay. The bit we didn't talk about in one of the other slides, I think, as well, is giving that you did touch on it, but it's giving the teams in the hotels the tools that they need to do the good welcome, and that's data. It's Muse has launched an AI summary, which will give the front desk a summary of the guests' previous stays and any questions that have come up, which is fantastic. I mean, I still think we're in a tough spot globally for staffing, which makes any of these things to do really well when everyone's very busy with short staffing, just
difficult. And I think, if the tech, can work really hard in the background, to your point around integrating whatever, booking system, and in this case, Muse, which I think is a fantastic integration, and making that whole personalization process a lot easier for the person that's welcoming the guests, so they can just concentrate on making that human connection, and they're empowered with all of the data that sits behind it. I think that's great. And I think one of the biggest challenges, which is great to see that there's much more integration now, is that data just sits in so many different systems. And to your point around, the team just don't have time to check multiple platforms to get that guest data. So some might sit in a CRM, some sits in a PMS, some sits, on someone's notepad. So, it needs to be kind of centralized. And I think it's great to see the advancements in that area. And similarly with, you mentioned that kind of a welcome, and there's some great tools to, personalize, and they can be activated as guests visit different areas. So for resort properties, it can be driven through like NFTs. So if they're, walking past the bar, it might remind them that it's a happy hour on in a couple of hours, or it is on now, why don't you drop in? So again, I think that there's a lot of tech that we can do, but again, I think it needs to be done in a considered way that is fitting of the brand. And there's a lot of data that we can get while the guest is there, and a lot of it can be simply by talking to them. So we both know a particular brand, The Resident, very well, and in fact I was up at their hotel in Edinburgh, which has recently opened just a few weeks ago. What was wonderful was every evening between 5 and 6, all of the guests staying are welcome to join some evening drinks where the hotel team are there. And it's a really relaxed environment, and you can get lots of advice about the local area and sort of insider tips of where to go. But also it gives the team an opportunity to get a bit more feedback from you about your stay, certain, constructive points of feedback that they can take back and then evolve, their operations, or share that with their team and celebrate the success. And, it's been open for a relatively short space of time, and they've got amazing reviews, which is, something the brand are so passionate about. And that whole kind of reputation management piece is I think, it's centered around talking to the guests and researching the guests and personalizing their stay.
That's amazing. I love that too. I love the opportunity. I used to love doing GM's drinks, staffing it. So
I think
anyway.
So yes, sorry, time is ticking away. So then, of course, they stay, then they leave. That lasting impression is just as important as the first impression. You want to give them a reason to come back. And then I think there's, again, a lot of that sort of post-stay comms that you can time, just, again, thanking them for their stay, giving them a reason to return, and then staying in touch with them. And that can be, in a very kind of digital and personal way, and giving them a reason to return. So yeah, that's kind of that whole circular returning guest kind of journey. And then I think onto our last slide, which is just really kind of to touch on other communication strategies. So we've talked a lot about the digital guest journey, but I think in terms of, leveraging your kind of public relations and your wider kind of stakeholders through journalists, influencers, etc., having a really clear plan of what your key messages are and when you release them. So, for example, you've just signed a new hotel that's going to open in a couple of years, and that's kind of your first sort of news message. But then working from there until the opening date and beyond, you'll need to really be clear around when you release information about the design of the hotel, maybe a acclaimed chef, or I don't know, a spa, a suite. So you can kind of drip feed that message in a way that allows you to speak to different audiences at the most optimal time. And of course, I think from a media perspective, there's a lot of lot of hotel openings that they want to cover, so you really get one opportunity to do it right, and then the media will move on to the next opening. So I think doing it well, doing it right, being personalized in your pitches and your approaches with journalists is really important as well, and then looking at beyond the opening, how can you bring your brand to life through collaborations and partnerships and events and activations that your guests and your community can be involved in, just you're really enriching those guests and that community that you're in. So I think that's really kind of an important point about kind of having that sustained approach. We've talked quite a bit about, I think, employee empowerment, and again, I think that communication and the way that they communicate aligned with the brand, the tone of voice, again, it all just needs to be aligned from your kind of digital comms to the way that the guests are greeted, and that the team feel empowered to act and speak in a certain way as well. And then I think, again, possibly driven by challenges of resourcing and staffing shortages, I think that there's been a big movement towards hotels using things like chatbots and kind of ResBot and integrating the conversations that they have into CRMs and using that data. I think some brands are doing it really well. I think other experiences maybe have been a little bit glitchy, and I think sort of AI and the more intuitive responses have come a long way, I'd say, from when they first were rolled out.
They have. We actually get with customers that use AI chat, sort of WhatsApp messaging with AI. When they ask for recommendation, it will send our platform to them, which is huge engagement because it's relevant. And then the last point I think is really kind of we can end on the power of reviews. I think this is a really important one.
So we can be communicators ourselves, whether that's through our journalists, whether it's through our own channels, but ultimately it's what our guests say about us which creates that loyalty. So in terms of really being proactive and encouraging your guests to review your hotel, and the benefits of having a lot of reviews and great reviews can be really closely linked to your occupancy and your ADR. So a TripAdvisor stat, which I think is really interesting, is that for every point increase in your review score, you can expect an increase of bookings by 14% and ADR by 11%. So if that wasn't a reason to drive positive reviews for your hotel, I'm not sure what is. But again, it's all about that trust, and if your guests are saying it, it has much more weight and credibility. So I think, again, encouraging your guests to do that in your interactions is going to be key as well. So so that is, in a nutshell, ABC, personalizing your hotel. There you go.
Well, so I have to give Ashleigh a huge thank you for doing this, because it's been fantastic. We'll post it up on our LinkedIn. Do connect with Ashleigh on LinkedIn. Any questions for her? She's absolutely brilliant. I really have, every time we chat, I take away something interesting and rewarding. And it's great to know you. And thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you, James. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Pleasure. Take care. Have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you too.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.